hurt, or two people. And it's really fun though, because there's so much inertia. So once you go into a wave, you really can't get out of it. You can't really kick out.
Scary. I mean, I just see some of the pictures from, I think it's from Makaha, where they're like outrigging these huge waves. It just looks nuts.
It's
I mean,
nuts.
remember when we caught a wave off the jetty break at ditch, and then we turned over. That was so crazy. Thank God nobody got hurt. That was so crazy.
So crazy, so shallow too. I was like, oh no.
Oh my God. And too many people around. That was not
too
good.
many people around. But it's fun having the canoe out when it's empty. And I've had some really good sessions when it's been snowing. And the last session I had was at North Bar this past fall, and it was basically like an all day like session, because I was afraid of getting a ticket, because you're not allowed to launch a boat from the beach. So I didn't want to come in. So I stayed out all day, and it was like a perfect southwest wind, which is offshore, right? And an east swell.
Oh God, that's hilarious.
And I wiped out so many times by myself. So I was surfing it by myself. It was absolutely fantastic. It was like an acid trip.
Amazing.
I don't take acid, but it was amazing.
How did you access that when you're in Hawaii? Like, I feel like it's not so easy to kind of infiltrate. And
it's because, I don't know, I just would be like, hey, I mean, I'm like the loner dude, right? So either I'm like a psycho and I'll get punched out, right, immediately by these dudes. Hey, and they're all like, hey. I'm like, oh yeah, hey, these guys are amazing. They're all super good, and they're old, and they're really good at canoe surfing. Hey, can I go canoe surfing with you guys? And they're like,
so you just show up and you're like, I want to
get vulnerable, like 100% vulnerable. Like it's like arriving in an island. Like if there's only one way to get off and on, like you're just there, and it's like, hey, and they could be like, get out of here, or they're really
That's
friendly.
Wonderful,
everybody.
Though. I think that is who you are, right? There is like you're just open, and you're like,
kind of giddy-eyed, or like starry-eyed, like, oh yeah, wow, this is my heroes, kind of canoe surfing. But those people are in a whole nother level. I mean, they're taking off in really hollow waves where there's more consequences. Their skill set's insane. And I was like, this is intense, like wiping out.
Yeah.
Like I haven't been in big waves with them, but the waves that I've been, I was like, wow, like because the boat's heavy, you can get really hurt, but everybody's really good. And
oh my God,
Makaha is a really amazing place because it's really like family oriented, and all sorts of crafts are being there. And it's just really nice for me as a half brown person to see all brown people on the beach. I think it's amazing. I haven't been to Senegal or Ghana or, I haven't been I've been in places in Indonesia where there's brown skin people, but it's nice, like being on Oahu, even if not surfing, just sitting there. Like I've gotten hit once in the head where I had staples in my head.
Oh my God.
And I was in Makaha for a couple of weeks, and I was fine just sitting there, not going in the water. It was so interesting. It was like Williamsburg from a long time ago mixed with the ocean, meaning like it was tough. Like if you can imagine, I don't know how old people are who listen to this, but like when Domino's Sugar was open, when it was a functional factory, like my dad had a studio there, right in that area, like a block from it, and it was really tough there. So it was like Makaha to me feels really tough because like stuff. I mean, I'm not part of it. I'm a visitor, but what I saw was like, oh wow, this is intense. But I like it for the water, and I like it for seeing like the kids and the whole crew in the water, and people like celebrating someone's life who died, and like having a huge party for them, and pumping music and pumping waves. And it's really it's like an easier kind of wave.
Communal.
Yeah, it's communal, and it's fun.
What I find also interesting is like, you've been to all these places like Hawaii and Indonesia, wherever, but also you really love the cold water. Like you do a lot of stuff here. You stay here in the winter, and you also, I remember you were in Iceland once, and like,
that was amazing.
What is your connection? Why do you feel connected to the cold water? Like, why is it interesting to you? Like Hawaii, you could be spending your whole winter in Hawaii, but you're here.
I guess I'm also close to my folks, so I'm really close to my parents, and they don't live far from me. I love the cold water. I've always really been intrigued by Inuit culture, Eskimo culture, like Laplanders and like people who live in the Arctic. Really into it. I'm reading a book right now it's called Black, White, and Eskimo. It's about Perry is a explorer from America who went to the Arctic, right, in the 1900s, and he had his assistant who is African American, who went there. So anyway, it's a story that I've always been interested in because it's about how both of these people ended up having families there.
That's incredible. At the
so
turn of the century.
Yeah, they both African American had a son there, and the other guy, the Caucasian man, the explorer, had a son there as well.
God, I wonder what that must have been like. Were you safer because it was a new frontier? So you were, a place where I imagine, it's a kind of rough terrain where you valued other people. There was no time for nitpicking on stupid things because it's survival, right?
It's survival, and they really depended on each other, like you're saying.
Right. So it's beyond the idea of what the societal constructs, racial constructs were at the time. If maybe there's this kind of freedom in that, and going to these new areas.
I think there was definitely, and also when they got back, that's when things kind of went back to the way the standards were, the social norms were. Like when the African American assistant, I think his name was Henson, and Perry, that's his last name, was the explorer, got back to New York. That's where the divide, Perry was elevated, Henson wasn't. Now he is, right? Because he was just as valuable as the explorer to get to the place, besides the people who helped him there.
Right. Again, it's like the narratives, right? Because it's
the narratives.
You think about the guy who climbed Mount Everest. They say that he climbed it, and then the Sherpa was just the Sherpa. It's like, what?
I know.
Are you fucking kidding me?
But that's the thing. If you want to be a dominator, right? You just continue that narrative, which works. Like it seems to be. It has people like us who are like, wait a minute, this is whack.
Well, I feel like the last 4 years showed us the culture of when you try to undo that narrative, kind of to show it for what it is and the construct of it. Like it's how really difficult that is for
the believers,
the folks in the culture that the constructed narrative serves. And also it's so kind of integrated into what we perceive as reality that it's really hard because they don't know anything other than what serves them. So it's really hard and really almost a violent kind of disconnect from those ideologies and how it serves them. It's even with the Capitol insurrection. It's basically that culture of losing power on every level of it. And sometimes it's just even your sense of reality. Like that must be really disorienting because if you really believe reality is like one way, and everyone's like, all of a sudden, like, no, you did construct it. And there are all these other people here who have a different reality than you, how disturbing that might be. And so it's like a dying dinosaur just holding on.
It is. It's fascinating. I mean, it's just that it comes with so many consequences for other people.
Yeah.
As the dinosaur dies, like there's so much violence. Right?
Yeah.
It's terrible. I mean, it has to change. Things have to change. I mean, they will hopefully.
Yeah. I want to go back to the cold water thing. What do you really enjoy about being out there in the winter?
Okay. I really, really enjoy the different types of birds I see. I'm nearsighted, so I have to be, they're not coming up to me, but like different birds come here, right? Like winter to summer migrating. So I really like to see these birds called scoters. I think that's how you pronounce their name. Like there's these black ducks that play in the surf. That's when you're in the ocean, but also like loons. I love seeing those types of birds, which make like an eerie sound and they dive underwater. I've never seen one swim underwater, but they're really good. I like the way the sky looks. I like the way the sun's low in the sky. Yeah, and I love the feeling of the like really cold, like air and water to a point, but like not till I get really uncomfortable. But I'm kind of comfortable to it, so I enjoy it. Like being suspended in a fluid, which is cold. It just feels so different than the summer because we do a lot of swimming in general. Like when it's warm, we do a lot of bay swimming. So when it's cold, it just feels like a different suspension quality. It's so tingly and penetrating. And you realize you can't stay in that long. That's the thing. Like you really have to keep track of how long you're staying in because if you get really cold, you kind of get too comfortable and then your body starts failing.
Yikes.
Like it's really hard to move your arms and stuff.
Yeah.
But my connection to it is I enjoy it. I've been to a polar bear plunge a long time ago. I really liked it. I'm interested in Inuit peoples. I don't know. I mean, what I read is like a lot of them don't swim because it's not really an opportunity to learn. It's so cold, right? So when something goes down in a boat, it's like really hard to survive. So I heard. I don't have any experience. Please tell me if I'm wrong or right or what it is. But so the cold is great to a point.
Right. Actually, you grew up in Soho. You grew up in the city. A kid of artists running around downtown, I imagine, in Williamsburg, where your dad's studio is. But it sounded like you had this relationship to the water through this boat you guys had uptown. But how did you get into surfing and all that stuff? Like, where did that come from?
I saw a picture. I did see a picture of Tom Blake on a postcard once, holding something really long. Like that wasn't, I don't know, maybe 15 or 16. Mm-hmm. But it just sort of stayed with me because I like the way the object looked. So it was more about the aesthetics, right? So he was on a long paddleboard that he made, like this old wooden paddleboard. He was standing next to a quiver board. He's like, that's really cool. What is that? That was one thing that intrigued me. But I come from more of a sailing background. Mm-hmm. So that was my sailing and swimming, right? I was raised on an island, Manhattan Island. Right? Mm-hmm. I was always around the river, right? Hudson River mostly, because it was closer to our house, closer to our place where we lived, the loft. Mm-hmm. So I'd go up and down the Hudson a lot, and I used to ride my unicycle like up and down the West Side Highway. When it was elevated, it was still there, but there was no cars on it before they took it down.
Wow.
And that was amazing. So I was always around the water. And then we had a boat, and I would always be at the boatyard. My parents were working on the boat, and I'd be rowing with my sisters or swimming in the water. It was really dirty in the Bronx,
Oh my God.
In Pelham Bay.
Yeah, back then.
Yeah, it was dirty, but it was really fun because we didn't know anything else. And then I would go to swim at Carmine Street swimming pool, mm-hmm. which is on Varick Street.
Right.
And so there's always been a connection and a super interest. And, I read about people swimming distances just like in magazines and stuff. And
I'm always fascinated by this relationship between city dwelling and then connection to nature in that kind of really immersive way. Because I think most people who live in cities don't see it as a nature destination site. But for example, when people used to ask, oh, you surf? Where do you surf? And it's like, we're surrounded by water. So it's a shift in perspective, but accessing it sometimes can be difficult if you don't know. So I always wonder, especially with a fellow person, like I grew up in New York as well.
Right.
How did you kind of connect? Where's your point of connection? I always find that very interesting.
I think it must have been my parents, and I was also interested in it. My sister was not as she's older than me. She wasn't as interested in being on the boat at some point. She wanted to be with her friends, right? And I was like, I want to be on the boat. This is so fun. Because it was like an opportunity to do something when you're at the shore of the river. Say, for example, being in New York a long time ago, and Manhattan's had many iterations of this, but access to the water was no, you can't go there. It's dirty or it's dangerous. Don't go in it. Don't put your foot in it. And there's always this kind of hysteria around it. Some of it's valid. I mean, the currents are really strong. Yes, it is dirty. Some, especially after it rains.
Mm-hmm. But it used to be really filthy before. I mean, I think it's cleaned up a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, it's cleaned up massively. Right. So there was lots of kind of taboos about going in it, and you can't go on it. So, but once I was on the boat, and my dad's been sending me pictures from recently. He's been sending a lot of photographs when we were kids on the boat. And I'm looking at the boat. I'm looking at the skyline of Manhattan as we're going by, as the World Trade Center is being built.
Right.
So it's so cool. And I think that just sort of made it oh, this is really available.
Amazing. Mm-hmm.
And then the idea you could go paddling in it. And then there, of course, fast forward, 30 years later, there's races in it, paddleboard races and all that stuff. And I was like, oh, this is insane. Mm-hmm. This is amazing. I'm going to do this. I love it. So it's just sort of, I mean, I'd be in the water much more if I could be, like anybody who likes yourself, take me there. I'm ready. I want to be in the water all the time. Right. It's just always been part of my life, I guess. And surfing is just one small little aspect of it, which I really enjoy. And I enjoy surfing with certain people, who's ever having a good time, everybody, I guess.
Not everybody.
Not everybody, but you know what I mean? It's been, it's just really, I don't know what to say about the cold when I think about the cold. Oh, back to the cold water.